Have you ever felt completely stuck, empty, tired, and hopeless, only to discover that the smallest, most unexpected moment could become the exact spark needed to change your entire life?
Oh, that is such a powerful question to start with.
Right. Well, welcome to the deep dive. We're thrilled to have you here with us today. For this exploration, we are unpacking a highly specific and honestly, utterly fascinating piece of source material.
Yeah, it's definitely not your typical psychological study.
Exactly. It is actually an excerpt detailing a B1 level English conversation, and it's titled Finding Light After the Fall. Now, for those of you listening, you might be wondering, why are we dedicating our time to a language learning excerpt?
Which is a fair question, honestly.
Right. But the mission today is to uncover how this simple two-speaker format manages to capture something incredibly vast. We're going to dissect the profound universal human experience of losing a job, the mechanics of falling into depression, and the specific little steps required to actually rebuild a shattered sense of confidence.
And, I think the contrast is what makes this material so compelling. We're taking this complex, often intimidating subject of mental health and examining it through a medium deliberately designed for intermediate language learners.
It kind of forces a complete distillation of the human experience, right? Down to its absolute core.
Precisely. It strips away all the noise.
So let's get right into the inciting incident of the narrative. Because the text sets up a very specific timeline that to me feels slightly counterintuitive.
Okay, how so?
Well, we have this woman who loses her job, and the source explicitly describes her state with three deliberate words: empty, tired, and hopeless. But it also notes that she slowly fell into depression.
Ah, right. The slow fall.
Yeah, and I have to push back on that timeline a bit. Like, if you lose your job, the loss is instantaneous, Your paycheck stops that day. Your key card stops working that day.
It's immediate, yeah.
It is like taking a sledgehammer to the foundation of a house. So if the foundation is completely removed overnight, why doesn't the house immediately collapse? Why is the source emphasizing a slow fall?
Well, the discrepancy between the timeline of the event and the timeline of the emotional response really comes down to the mechanics of human survival.
Okay, survival mechanics. Walk me through that.
So when a massive structural change happens, like the instantaneous loss of a career, the brain's immediate reaction is rarely depression. It's usually this massive surge of adrenaline.
Yeah.
You enter an acute survival mode.
Like a panic response.
Exactly. You are rapidly updating the resume. You're aggressively reaching out to your network. You are basically functioning on the high-octane fuel of panic. You are essentially that cartoon coyote sprinting off the edge of the cliff.
Oh, wow. You are floating in midair, legs still moving furiously because you simply haven't looked down yet.
Right, the gravity just hasn't had a chance to assert itself over the forward momentum of the panic.
That makes so much sense. So the slow fall only really kicks in later.
Exactly. It begins when that initial burst of survival adrenaline inevitably runs out. The text uses those three words: empty, tired, hopeless, not just as a random list of sad adjectives, but as a sequential psychological cascade.
A cascade. So it starts with empty.
It starts with empty. Losing a job is not just the cessation of income, it is the sudden evaporation of your daily architecture, your social interactions, your immediate short-term goals, and honestly, a massive chunk of your identity are just gone.
Right. Monday morning arrives, and there's nowhere to go. The space where your purpose lived is suddenly a void.
And the adrenaline fades, you look down, and there's just an empty canyon beneath you.
But how does the emptiness physically translate into the second word, tired? Because, the source doesn't say she was physically exerting herself.
Well, emptiness is incredibly taxing on the human brain. Think about a normal workday. The structure of the day makes thousands of micro decisions for you.
Like when to wake up, what to wear, who you'll talk to.
Exactly. And when that structure vanishes, you wake up in the morning and have to generate your own momentum from absolute zero. You have to invent a reason to get out of bed.
You have to manufacture a daily purpose out of thin air.
Right. The cognitive load of constantly pushing against a void, day after day, trying to find traction where there is none, it creates a profound psychological exhaustion.
The brain is basically burning thousands of calories just trying to figure out what to do with a Tuesday morning. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
It's the fatigue of constant internal friction.
And that chronic fatigue inevitably leads to the third stage described in the text, which is hopeless.
Because you just run out of gas completely.
Exactly. When you're waking up empty and the effort to fill that emptiness leaves you cognitively exhausted by noon, your brain just stops believing that the future will look any different.
Hopelessness is just the mathematical result of extended emptiness and exhaustion.
Yes. The system simply shuts down to conserve what little energy is left.
Man, that cascade from the adrenaline wearing off to the void, to the exhaustion of navigating the void, to the final shutdown, it paints such a vivid picture of where this woman is standing in the narrative.
It really does. She is at the absolute bottom of the canyon.
But, and this is where it gets interesting, the source material pivots here. It doesn't leave her in the dark, it introduces a turning point. However, the text describes her turnaround not as a massive revelation, but specifically as the small moment that became her first spark of change.
Which is a very deliberate phrasing.
And I stumble on this concept, honestly.
Yeah.
When a person is sitting in a state of absolute, system-wide hopelessness, a tiny spark seems, completely insufficient.
You'd think they need something bigger.
Right. You would think someone in that deep of a hole needs a massive cinematic lightning bolt of realization to counter that level of darkness. Why a spark?
Well, a massive lightning bolt of realization requires a functioning electrical grid to process the energy.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
Right. When a person is experiencing the profound exhaustion and hopelessness we just described, their internal grid is completely offline. Grand gestures or massive shifts are actually deeply threatening to a depleted system.
Because they demand too much energy.
Exactly. If you tell someone in that state, you need to completely reinvent your career path today, or you need to adopt an entirely new life philosophy that demands a reservoir of emotional and cognitive energy they simply do not possess.
It almost reinforces their feeling of failure because they can't meet the demand of the grand gesture.
Precisely. It is asking a car with a dead battery to power a rock concert. The demand itself becomes another crushing weight.
Wow, yeah. So a spark is all they can handle.
Consider the alternative presented in the text. A small moment is entirely manageable. It requires zero emotional expenditure. A spark could be something as mundane as noticing a strange cloud formation.
Or having a 3-second unexpected interaction with the cashier.
Or a sudden memory that makes you smile for half a second. It does not demand a life overhaul. It is simply a momentary lapse in the depression.
A tiny, undeniable proof of concept that the system is still capable of feeling something other than emptiness.
Right. And for you listening, this is a critical mechanism to understand when facing overwhelming challenges.
Because the cultural narrative often insists that turning your life around requires a monumental intervention, right? A dramatic rescue or a sudden epiphany.
But when you are truly in the dark, scanning the horizon for a massive spotlight will only blind you to the actual pathways out.
The text emphasizes the spark because that tiny, manageable, low-energy moment is the only catalyst a depleted mind can actually process.
Exactly. You don't need to rebuild the entire house in one day. You just need to find one single brick that hasn't crumbled.
That is so profound, which creates this really fascinating transition into how this woman actually processes and communicates her experience. Because the medium she uses to fan this spark into a flame is the very source material we are studying.
Right, the B1 level conversation.
Yeah, she isn't writing a clinical psychology paper or a dense memoir. The source explicitly highlights that the conversation uses humor, honest emotions, and simple everyday English.
And honestly, the choice of a B1 level framework is arguably the most powerful element of the narrative.
Because B1 is an intermediate language level, right?
Yes. It is highly functional and clear, but it deliberately lacks highly complex, abstract vocabulary.
It is like trying to paint a complex emotional masterpiece, using only 3 basic primary colors. You do not have the subtle, fancy shades of paint to hide behind.
That's a perfect analogy.
But I want to challenge the efficacy of this. We spend centuries inventing complex vocabulary to capture nuance. If I'm going through a devastating psychological cascade, doesn't stripping away my vocabulary actively limit my ability to express the true depth of my pain?
It seems like it would on the surface.
Like, if I cannot use terms like existential dread or cognitive dissonance, am I not just dumbing down my own experience?
Well, the danger there is assuming that complex vocabulary always facilitates connection. In the realm of deep emotional trauma, language frequently operates as a shield rather than a bridge.
A shield? How so?
When humans have access to a vast, sophisticated vocabulary, we have a profound tendency to intellectualize our feelings. We use clinical jargon and abstract sociological concepts to create distance between our conscious minds and the raw, unpolished pain.
Oh, I see. So if I say, I am experiencing an acute crisis of professional identity exacerbated by systemic economic shifts. I sound incredibly self-aware.
You do, but you are analyzing yourself like a bug under a microscope rather than actually feeling the loss.
You're keeping the pain safely at arm's length. The intellectualization is literally a defense mechanism.
Exactly. By forcing the narrative into simple, everyday English, those sophisticated defense mechanisms are forcibly dismantled. You cannot hide behind $50 words in a B1 conversation.
You were forced to look at another person and say, I felt empty, I felt tired, I felt hopeless.
And those primary colors are stark, undeniable, and they sit much closer to the bone. It forces a level of vulnerability that jargon actively prevents.
The simplicity removes the armor. That is fascinating. And the text introduces another tool right alongside that simple honesty, which is humor.
Yes, humor is key here.
It notes that the conversation uses humor to explore this dark journey, which to me seems like a highly volatile mix. You've got B1 level language, raw depression, and comedy.
It does sound like a volatile mix, but they actually operate synergistically to make the vulnerability survivable.
Because raw honesty, without any buffer, can be completely overwhelming.
Right. Humor, specifically within the constraints of simple language, functions as a release valve. It is not about writing punchlines or minimizing the trauma. It is about acknowledging the absolute absurdity of the darkness.
It allows the two speakers to look at the monster in the room and agree that, yes, the monster is terrifying, but it also has a slightly ridiculous haircut.
Exactly. You shrink the overwhelming nature of the depression down to a manageable reality that two people can casually discuss over coffee, rather than a cosmic horror that cannot be named.
And that points directly to the actual mechanics of her recovery, as outlined in the text.
It does. The way the story is told perfectly mirrors the specific actions she took to heal.
Because the source lists her methods as healing, self-care, funny life moments, and little steps that helped her rebuild her confidence and enjoy life again.
The simplicity of the medium really reflects the simplicity of the action.
I want to dig into that specific pairing, though, because the text links funny life moments directly with self-care. And this creates friction with how self-care is typically marketed to us today.
Oh, absolutely. The modern iteration of self-care is highly commercialized.
It's an entire industry. It tells you to book a luxury spa day, drink a $30 green juice, and meditate on a mountaintop.
Yeah, it's all about the escape.
Right. But relying on those grand gestures feels like putting a fresh coat of expensive paint on a car with no engine. It looks fantastic to the neighbors, but the internal machinery is still broken. You aren't actually driving anywhere.
That's a very accurate critique.
So how does something as mundane as noticing a funny life moment act as a superior form of self-care? And more importantly, how does a simple laugh actively rebuild the complex machinery of human confidence?
To understand the mechanism, we really have to define what confidence actually is in a psychological context.
Okay, let's define it.
Confidence is not arrogance or performative extroversion. Confidence is the internal belief in your own agency. Your belief that you have the capacity to navigate the world and affect your environment.
Oh, I like that. The capacity to affect your environment.
Right. So when you lose your job and fall into the void, your confidence is shattered because your assumed ability to navigate your known world completely failed. The environment acted upon you, and you were powerless to stop it.
You become a passive victim of gravity in the slow fall.
Exactly. And commercialized self-care, the spa days and the escapes, often reinforces that passivity. It is a retreat from the world. It is a distraction from the void, a temporary bandaging of the symptom rather than a cure for the disease.
Wow. So the funny life moments and the little steps highlighted in the source are different because they aren't retreats.
They are entirely different. They are micro-assertions of agency.
Okay, walk me through that. How is laughing at something an assertion of agency?
Well, imagine you are walking through the grocery store, still carrying the heavy, exhausting weight of that hopelessness. Someone drops a carton of eggs and it makes a ridiculous sound, and you laugh.
Just a spontaneous reaction.
Yes, but in that microsecond, you are not a passive victim of a ruined career. You are an active participant in the present environment. You are observing, processing, and responding to the world around you with your own unique perspective.
The humor requires you to actively engage with the absurdity of life.
Precisely. You are making a choice to find the humor rather than letting the environment dictate that you must remain entirely solemn and broken.
That choice is the exertion of agency.
Every single time you take a little step, whether it is laughing at a funny life moment, making a simple meal, or engaging in a brief conversation using simple, honest English, you are proving to your brain that you still have the capacity to navigate the world.
You're actively laying a single brick on the empty lot where your foundation used to be.
Exactly. You do not try to drop a fully built house onto the lot in one day. You lay one brick of agency, then another.
And the neurological loop begins to rewire itself. It goes from, I am powerless in the void, to, I can interact with my surroundings and find joy in them.
And suddenly the confidence returns, not because you magically landed a better job, but because you rebuilt the muscle of interacting with reality. You proved you could survive the emptiness by simply existing in the moment.
And the structure you build out of those little steps is infinitely more resilient than the one you lost, because you understand exactly how it was built.
You understand the value of the primary colors, the power of the simple spark, and the structural integrity of a single funny life moment.
Honestly, that is a staggering amount of depth to pull from a language learning exercise. The journey outlined in this B1 text is just a masterclass in the physics of human resilience.
It really is.
We examine the violent removal of a person's foundation, the subsequent adrenaline rush, and the inevitable cognitive exhaustion that leads to a slow, compounding descent into hopelessness.
But the turning point wasn't a Herculean effort.
No, it was the willingness to accept a tiny, manageable spark. By stripping away the heavy intellectual armor of complex jargon, this woman used the raw, primary colors of everyday English to state her pain honestly.
She used humor to shrink the monster of depression down to a manageable size.
And she rejected the commercialized escape of grand self-care in favor of micro-assertions of agency little steps and funny life moments that, brick by brick, rebuilt her capacity to navigate the world.
The elegance lies entirely in the simplicity. It strips the noise away from the healing process.
It truly does. And as we close out this deep dive, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final thought to mull over as you go about your week.
Always good to have something to reflect on.
Definitely. If a profound, life-altering journey of surviving severe depression and meticulously rebuilding a shattered identity can be perfectly captured in the simple, everyday English meant for language learners, what does that say about the way we communicate our own struggles?
That is a great question.
Do we constantly hide behind complicated jargon, clinical diagnoses, and big words when talking about our mental health because we are afraid of the raw truth? When the foundation crumbles, maybe we don't need a textbook or a grand philosophical retreat. Maybe all we really need is the courage to use simple, honest words to find our light again.
Beautifully said.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Pay attention to the little steps, keep your eyes open for those tiny sparks, and we will catch you next time.